It was supposed to be a routine hunt. We had received a contract to track down a high-rank rat halos that had been terrorizing a nearby village. The locals were desperate, and the bounty promised a handsome reward, enough to cover our expenses and then some. My team consisted of me, the seasoned hunter, and Marcus, my trusted partner who was known for his sharp instincts and even sharper wit. We set out with high spirits, eager to complete our task. The Black Marsh was known for its treacherous terrain and unpredictable weather, but we were prepared. We navigated through the thick underbrush, our boots squelching in the muck, and our eyes alert for any signs of the rat halos. The air was thick with humidity, and the sky overhead was overcast, casting everything in a dim, gray light. We pressed on, confident in our tracking skills and well-equipped to handle the beast. As we ventured deeper into the marsh, the atmosphere began to change. The usual sounds of the wild, chirping insects, croaking frogs, and the distant calls of birds, faded away, replaced by an oppressive silence. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. A thick, unnatural fog started to roll in, obscuring our vision and making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Marcus and I decided to scout ahead, hoping to find some trace of our quarry. We pushed through the dense fog, our senses heightened. The eerie quiet was unnerving, and every crackle of a branch or rustle of leaves made us jump. The swamp seemed to grow more foreboding with each step, the fog swirling around us like a living entity. Then, we stumbled upon something extraordinary. It was a massive, ancient altar, half buried in the muck and overgrown with vines. The stone was carved with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a dark, otherworldly energy. The runes glowed faintly in the dim light, casting an unsettling green hue across the surrounding area. It looked like something out of a nightmare, an ancient relic of forgotten magic. Marcus, ever the joker, couldn't resist making a quip. "Looks like we found the local demon summoning spot. Hope you didn't bring any sacrificial offerings." His laughter was short-lived. As the sound of his joke faded into the air, a deep, vibrating roar erupted from the depths of the swamp. It was a low, resonant sound that seemed to reverberate through my bones. My blood ran cold as I looked at Marcus, whose face had gone ashen. "That's not rat halos," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "We need to get out of here. Now." Panic began to set in, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. We started to back away slowly, our eyes scanning the fog for any sign of the source of the roar. The fog seemed to thicken around us, and the oppressive silence was replaced by a low, guttural growling that echoed through the mist. The growl was unlike any creature I had ever encountered. It was more of a primal, guttural rumble that felt like it was coming from the very earth itself. Then, from the dense fog emerged a creature so horrifying it defied description. It was enormous, its form partially obscured by the swirling mist. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence, casting a sickly light that cut through the fog. The creature had a body covered in dark, rotting scales, and its limbs were twisted and elongated in unnatural ways. It moved with an unsettling grace, its massive frame barely making a sound as it advanced toward us. I could barely keep my footing as the creature loomed closer. Its presence was overwhelming, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But we were frozen, unable to tear our eyes away from the monstrosity that seemed to embody the very essence of fear. The creature's eyes were locked on us, and I could feel a palpable sense of dread as it drew nearer. "What in the gods' names is that?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely audible over the creature's deep growl. "I don't know," Marcus replied, his voice shaking. "But we need to get out of here, now." We turned to run, but the fog seemed to close in around us, disorienting us and making it difficult to find our way. The creature let out another roar, a sound that was both terrifying and mournful, as if it was lamenting something lost. We sprinted through the swamp, the muck clinging to our boots and slowing us down. The fog made every turn and twist of the forest look the same, and we struggled to keep our bearings. Despite our best efforts, the creature seemed to be everywhere at once, its glowing eyes always just out of sight but never far behind. The ground shook with its every step, and the air was filled with a palpable sense of menace. We finally burst out of the fog and into a small clearing, our breath coming in ragged gasps. "We need to regroup," I said, trying to catch my breath. "We can't keep running blindly like this." Marcus nodded, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "Agreed. We need a plan." We quickly assessed our surroundings and took a moment to catch our breath. The fog had begun to thin, but the creature's presence was still palpable, lurking just out of sight. We had to find a way to confront it or escape its clutches. As we prepared to move, I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was toying with us, its malevolent intelligence watching our every move. We carefully made our way back to the altar, hoping it might provide some clue or advantage. The runes on the stone seemed to pulsate more intensely, and the dark energy around them felt almost tangible. I examined the symbols closely, trying to decipher their meaning. Marcus stood guard, his eyes constantly scanning the fog for any sign of the creature. Suddenly, there was a low, rumbling growl from behind us. We spun around to see the creature emerging from the mist once more, its eyes blazing with a fierce light. It was clear that it had been waiting for us, and its patience had run out. We braced ourselves for the confrontation, knowing that our survival depended on how well we could adapt to this new, horrifying reality. The creature let out a deafening roar, and we charged toward it, weapons ready. The battle was fierce and brutal, the creature's strength and speed far surpassing anything we had anticipated. We fought with everything we had, our strikes landing on its rotting scales with little effect. It was a relentless fight, each moment filled with the fear that we might not make it out alive. Despite our efforts, the creature seemed almost invincible, its roars and growls echoing through the swamp as it pressed its attack. It was a desperate, grueling battle that tested every ounce of our skill and resolve. Finally, after what felt like hours, we managed to find a weakness in its defenses and delivered a decisive blow. The creature let out one final, mournful roar before collapsing into the muck. Exhausted and battered, we stood over the fallen beast, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The swamp was silent once more, the fog slowly beginning to lift. We had survived, but the encounter had left us deeply shaken. The Black Marsh had revealed its darkest secrets, and we would never forget the night we faced a creature beyond our wildest nightmares. We made our way back to the village, the weight of the night's events hanging heavy on our shoulders. The Rat Halo's hunt was forgotten, replaced by the memory of the creature that had haunted the depths of the swamp. The villagers were grateful for our return, but the true story of what we had faced was one we kept to ourselves. Some things were better left untold, and the Black Marsh would forever remain a place of dark memories and unsettling mysteries. I'll never forget that night in the Forsaken Forest. I had ventured out on what was supposed to be a routine hunt for a behemoth. The creature had been spotted near the fringes of the forest, a massive, lumbering beast with a reputation for causing havoc among the local settlements. My goal was simple: track it down, bring it to justice, and return with a bounty that would earn me some much-needed respect in the guild. But fate had other plans for me. It was dusk when I set up camp. The dense canopy above blocked most of the fading sunlight, leaving me in a shroud of darkness as the moon began its ascent. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual cacophony of nocturnal life seemingly absent. I found a relatively flat area between a pair of ancient trees and set up my tent. The air was thick and humid, the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves mingling with the metallic tang of my sweat. As I settled in, I checked my gear one last time. My sword was sharp, my shield was secure, and my traps were ready. I was just starting to relax when I heard it. At first, it was a distant rumble, almost like the low growl of a sleeping beast. But then it intensified, growing louder and more resonant until it seemed to shake the very ground beneath me. The sound was deep, guttural, and seemed to come from the earth itself rather than from any one creature. I froze, my hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of my sword. The growl was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It was as if the forest itself had come alive and was warning me of an imminent danger. My breath caught in my throat, and I strained to listen. The growl continued, growing in intensity, echoing through the dense trees in a way that felt almost supernatural. Determined to investigate, I grabbed my lantern and made my way cautiously toward the source of the noise. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe around me as I moved, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick foliage. My footsteps were silent on the carpet of leaves and branches, but I felt an oppressive weight in the air, as if I were being watched. The growl led me deeper into the forest. As I navigated through the underbrush, I noticed something unusual, an eerie glint in the darkness. I stopped and squinted, trying to make out what it was. The glint was not from any familiar monster I knew. It was more like a pair of eyes, unnervingly bright and fixed on me from the shadows. I couldn't see the rest of the creature, only those glowing orbs that seemed to pierce through the dark. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing fear. There was no reply, just the continuous, menacing growl that seemed to surround me. The sound grew louder with each step I took, reverberating through my chest and making my heart race. My hands trembled as I clutched my weapon, and I forced myself to keep moving toward the source of the noise. Every instinct I had told me to turn back, but curiosity, and perhaps a bit of foolish bravery, kept me going. The forest around me seemed to change as I ventured further. The air grew colder, and a strange fog began to roll in, swirling around my legs and making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The once familiar trees now looked twisted and alien, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The growl continued to build in intensity, now almost deafening. Suddenly, I came to a small clearing. The fog was thicker here, and my lantern's light barely cut through it. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone altar, covered in strange runes that glowed faintly with an eerie blue light. The runes were etched deeply into the stone, and they seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the growl. I approached the altar, my heart pounding. The symbols were unlike anything I had seen before, and they exuded a dark energy that sent chills down my spine. I reached out a hand to touch the altar, but a sudden, sharp noise made me freeze. It was a rustling sound, like something moving through the underbrush. I spun around, my lantern swinging wildly. That's when I saw it. Emerging from the shadows was a creature so monstrous it defied belief. It was enormous, its body covered in patches of dark, rotting flesh that seemed to writhe and shift. Its eyes were the same sickly green orbs I had seen earlier, glowing with a malevolent intelligence that seemed to see right through me. The creature's mouth was filled with rows of jagged teeth, and as it moved, I could see its breath misting in the cold air. I stood frozen, my weapon hanging limply by my side. The creature seemed to regard me with an almost curious expression, as if it was deciding whether or not to devour me. The growl had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that was even more oppressive. The creature's massive limbs moved with a fluid grace that belied its size, and it began to advance slowly, deliberately. Desperation overcame me, and I tried to back away, but my foot snagged on a root, sending me crashing to the forest floor. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes never leaving the creature. I raised my weapon, but the creature merely tilted its head as if in amusement. It didn't make a move toward me, instead, it seemed to be waiting for something. I had no idea what it wanted or why it was there. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The creature's eyes were fixed on me, and I felt an intense sense of dread, as if it were reading my thoughts and finding them wanting. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might burst from my chest. The creature let out a low, rumbling growl, but it wasn't menacing. It was almost like a sigh, filled with a sense of resignation or boredom. Then, without warning, it turned and began to retreat back into the darkness. Its massive form disappeared into the fog, and the eerie glow of its eyes was the last thing I saw before it vanished completely. I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of the encounter settling heavily on my shoulders. The growl was gone, replaced by the distant hoot of an owl and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief mixed with an equally strong feeling of confusion. What had just happened? What was that creature? I stumbled back to my camp, my mind racing with questions and fear. My hands were still trembling as I packed up my things, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The behemoth hunt was forgotten, the forest had revealed a far more terrifying presence. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I kept my weapon close and listened to the sounds of the forest, waiting for any sign that the creature might return. To this day, I don't know what that thing was or what it wanted. All I know is that sometimes, when the night is still and the wind is right, I hear that same deep, resonant growl echoing through the forest. It's as if it's calling to me, taunting me, reminding me of that night when I ventured into the unknown and faced something beyond my comprehension. The forsaken forest holds many secrets, and some of them are best left undisturbed. Everyone in the guild laughed at me when I said I wanted to tackle the cursed caverns alone. It's a suicide mission, grumbled old Joran, the grizzled veteran. No one comes back from those tunnels. His laughter was harsh, and the other hunters joined in, their voices mingling with derision. You're just asking for trouble, said Alara, a sharp-eyed hunter known for her wit. You'd be better off chasing a Lagombai. But I was determined to prove them wrong. I had always been the one to take on challenges others shied away from. With my trusty sword and shield, I set out early one morning. The sky was a cold, gray expanse, and the air was crisp with the promise of the unknown. I packed enough provisions to last a few days, though I hoped I wouldn't need them. As I approached the entrance to the cursed caverns, a shiver ran down my spine. The cavern's entrance was a gaping maw of darkness, framed by jagged rocks and twisted vines. An old, rusted sign warned of the dangers within, but I brushed it off. My determination was stronger than any fear. I took a deep breath and stepped into the cavern. The cool, damp air greeted me, and the sound of my footsteps echoed eerily off the walls. The tunnel ahead was narrow and winding, and the darkness seemed to close in around me. My lantern cast long, flickering shadows that danced on the walls, making the cavern seem alive. Here goes nothing, I muttered to myself, trying to steady my nerves. My voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence, and the only response was the echo of my own words. The deeper I went, the more intense the feeling of dread became. The walls felt like they were closing in, and whispers, faint and indecipherable, seemed to float around me. What's that noise? I whispered, straining to catch a clear sound. The whispers seemed to grow louder, a chorus of ghosts murmuring secrets just out of reach. Despite the mounting fear, I pressed on. I checked my map, though it was mostly useless in the labyrinthine tunnels. Every turn seemed to lead me deeper into the heart of darkness. The air grew colder, and the chill seemed to seep into my bones. My breath formed misty plumes in front of me. After what felt like hours, I came across an old, rusty door. It was covered in strange runes etched deeply into the metal. The runes glowed faintly with a sickly green light, and the air around them hummed with dark energy. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. This is probably a bad idea, I said aloud, but my voice was swallowed by the cavern's gloom. But I'm already this far. No turning back now. Ignoring the warnings, I pushed open the creaking door. The hinges groaned, and the door swung open with a resounding thud. Beyond it was a vast chamber, its size magnified by the darkness that enveloped it. The chamber was filled with a thick, acrid mist that clung to the air, and the ceiling was lost in shadows. In the center of the chamber, partially obscured by the swirling fog, was an enormous, slumbering beast. The beast was colossal, its scales covered in a thick layer of dust. It looked ancient, and the air around it felt charged with an eerie energy. I took a cautious step forward, my heart pounding. "This is something else," I murmured, awestruck by the creature's immense size. Just then, a deep, rumbling growl filled the chamber, and the creature's eyes snapped open. The eyes glowed with an otherworldly light that pierced through the fog. The creature's gaze locked onto me, and I felt a chill run through me. Oh," I said, my voice quivering. "Not good." Time seemed to stretch and slow as I stood frozen in place. The beast began to rise slowly, its massive form shifting and unfurling. The ground trembled with its movements, and the chamber was filled with a bone-chilling roar that echoed off the walls. The roar was a guttural, vibrating sound that seemed to reverberate through my entire body. I forced myself to move, stumbling backward, trying to make my way back to the door. "I've got to get out of here," I muttered, panic rising in my voice. The fog seemed to close in around me, disorienting me and obscuring my path. The beast's growls grew louder, more insistent, and I could feel the oppressive weight of its presence pressing down on me. The chamber's layout seemed to shift, the walls warping in response to the creature's power. I caught glimpses of the beast through the swirling mist, its eyes always fixed on me, its growls echoing through the darkness. Finally, I found the door again, the rusty metal handle cold and slick with sweat. I yanked it open, stumbling into the narrow tunnel beyond. The beast's roar echoed behind me, a sound of fury and frustration. I ran as fast as I could, the fog pressing in around me, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. "I have to make it out," I panted, trying to navigate through the disorienting fog. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually, I emerged into the fresh air of the marsh. The night was clear, and the stars shone brightly overhead. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling with the after-effects of the encounter. Looking back at the entrance to the cursed caverns, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering dread. The cavern's dark maw was now closed behind me, and the memory of that night would haunt me forever. The guild's laughter echoed in my mind, but now it was a bitter reminder of the danger that lay hidden in the depths of the earth. I had survived, but the ordeal had left me deeply shaken. The cursed caverns had revealed a terror beyond my imagination, and I had barely escaped with my life.